a vibrant and inclusive political scene. Truly, we cannot continue in the same mode. With the kind of technology available today, our current electoral process is too expensive, ineffective, and fraught with malpractices. And that's one area that we need to truly disrupt. I know that even some of us have developed products that can make the same electoral process so easy, transparent. Easy and transparent. And an area we can leapfrog the rest of the world to do. With the technical revolution, it is important that also government begin to look at ways that SMEs will thrive and grow and become large businesses. Most of the SMEs, if you go to Yaba, for example, where you see some of these tech hubs, these are just young individuals trying to start businesses. In America, one of the biggest places of revenue is the SBA, the Small Business Associations. They make up a lot more revenue for the government than even the big ones. How are we encouraging these young SMEs to come up? All we need to give them proper access to the right technology, which sometimes they may not be able to afford themselves, but if we give them access to that and lead them to the African entrepreneurial spirit, you'll find out that they will do great things. Governance cannot continue to be the same. A situation whereby government is completely remote from the masses. With what is happening today, it's a lot easier. So you can't say, well, I need to go to television and speak to the world. It is too late because television doesn't get to everybody. Not everybody's got a television to watch. But in Nigeria, for example, in fact, if you say that in Africa, we have over 344% of mobilized communities. So it's an area that we can use to be able to disseminate information to the right people, and also an area that we can use to sift the right information from the masses that we can use for governance. I would like to also add, for African leaders in the political sector to set up a think tank to be at the forefront of the digital revolution. And their job also is to sift out and leverage some digital disruption technologies that can assist the growth of the continent. Kenya recently, I think the chairman, they set up a task force called Blockchain and Artificial Intelligence Task Force. And their job is to look at how they can use that for the growth of, that's an awesome idea, awesome thing to do. And I'm sure it's going to help the Kenyan government a lot. And the chairman is one Professor Ndemo, something like that. And I think that that's what I believe African countries need to be doing. One of the things that really baffles me is that today, SARS, I used to wonder, why do we still to conduct inter-African trade with the US dollar as the base currency? Doesn't make sense to me. I'm not an economist. It still doesn't make sense in any way or shape to me. If I'm going to Malawi today, I have to change naira to dollars. And I get to Malawi, I change from dollar to their local currency. Who is losing? The two countries are losing, and America is gaining. And they have no part in this. Is it technology? It's available. Even us in eTransit can provide it for you. But it's available to do it. So long as our leaders, have the will and desire to be economically uncolonized. Now, our leaders in education would truly need to rethink our educational system. We need to. One, the traditional method, like I said before, is too limited. So a new design of teaching models. This issue of standing always in one class, the teacher stands and then the class is all over the place and you are teaching them. That need to go. It can't continue. It may be effective some years back. In this day and age, there are other ways to do it. I used to say something in my office. I said, look, what are the better other ways we can do what we're doing as a switching company? You know, I think it's clearly important. Delivery of our courses using distance learning is important, and I know a lot of our schools are beginning to do that. Also, retain the cost of running an educational institution in all its aspects. Like I said before, I know this is very controversial and very unpopular, you know, because it simply means that profs, you need to start looking for a new job or relearn new skills. That's a fact, and that's the truth. Because the moment I'm going to say, look, if I can save costs in this way by delivering this kind of, from this, you know, I will do it. If I'm a businessman, to save my cost. But like I said, each of these will always profile and bring a new set of jobs that people can learn or relearn. Like I said before, I asked my office, I said, look, what can happen tomorrow that will disrupt our business? That will make us not to exist anymore? Because that is possible. And finally, to business leaders, your business plans of 5 years projection is risky. It's risky. You can't continue with that because you can have it, but run on a 1 year or 2 year plan. Because that's the best way to do. I used to ask, and an important question you need to ask in your business is, where do you see this business in the next 1 year? Not in the next 5 years. Because in the next 1 month, you may be out of business. Who or what can make us extinct before the next management meeting? Those are things you need to ask yourselves. Other question is, what can we do to gain competitive advantage against our competitors? Now, the fact of the matter is, disruption is here to stay. You cannot change it. We need to see what is it we can learn from it and take it out from there. And I conclude by saying the fact is either you are one of the disruptors or you'll be disrupted. I hope you join the disruptors themselves. Thank you very much.
Please make that round of applause more resounding. Indeed, I sent a note to him apologizing for the technical disruptions that he experienced during his presentation. Thank you so much, sir, Mr. Valentine Obi. And before we move on, I would like to acknowledge the presence of other lead presenters who are here already. And on the list, I have distinguished Professor Peter Okebokola already here present. I also have Professor Aremo here present. And I also have Miss Lucia Logwane also here present. Dr. Morakiayo Okparisin. We also have Dr. Kainsile Litchfield, Dr. Adebisi Adewale, and Mr. Biodun Fijabi. You're all welcome, sirs. Thank you so much. We're going to use the next 2 to 3 minutes to take reactions from the audience, and I would like us to be as articulate and succinct as possible so that we catch up with some of the time that we have lost. But in my own view, the key implication of your presentation, sir, is that yesterday's tentative approach won't deliver anymore in Africa. Rather, leaders in Africa need absolute clarity about 2 things. Number 1, understanding how technology is transforming industries and how the organizations and nations can respond. And number 2, that leaders in Africa need absolute clarity also about digital demands, unparalleled agility, and the resolve to bet boldly. Please, if you have a comment or a response to the presentation, signify by raising up your hands. We'll take only 2. Only 2? Okay. Thank you, sir. Professor Jonathan Aremo.
Yeah, thank you. I think I have to thank my friend Fahad for a wonderful presentation. One of the areas that struck me most was the issue of payment system. Payment system. We need a payment system because a lot of money is lost. Nigeria want to trade with Benin, and then we have to open letter of credit in euro or dollar or pound sterling. It's a waste. It's a matter of linking the bank together to shake hands over here and then putting the currency among ourselves so that we don't need dollar. And when we started this process in ECOWAS, Valobi assisted us. I mean, your staff in Cote d'Ivoire assisted us a lot. But up till now, it's so sad that in ECOWAS, the payment system is yet to take off. They copied it from us in ECOWAS, and then it's being used in SADC, it's being used in COMESA, it's being used in EAC. I mean, it's uncalled for. You want to cross to Benin to go and buy Apple. You have to change your money to CD, from Naira to dollar first, and then to CD, over to, up to server. And at each time you are changing money, you are paying something. And letter of credit make it worse. We need to sit up. There's enough technology to take care of everything we wanted. Thank you.
Professor Jonathan Aremo. Yes, sir.
Good morning, everybody. I like to take a different tack to all of this. I'm a computer scientist by training, and Valentine, you've done a good job in disrupting, even in your industry. When we started computing in the early 70s, the question was, what can a computer do? Eventually, it became, what should we allow a computer to do? And over time, what we have seen is that we have been making information and computing as a commodity, whereas the commodity itself is information like Valentine. And the computer is only a means for you to transmit and exchange that information. Now, my problem is, at the level of technology now, we have lost values. And this is where institutions like this will come in. It is no longer a matter of what technology can do, but really, do we need to put some kind of cap on what it does? There is the possibility now of 3D printing to actually get your printer to print out a gun that works. There is the possibility to clone human beings. And those are the areas that I challenge us to look at the social implications of computing. Not just the commercial, not just the business, but the very serious social implications of computing. We are losing our values, and we are allowing technology to just run rampant. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Olorunshola Afolabi. I am grateful for that contribution. Of course, it's actually talking about the arguments and the debates we're having about pro and anti-technological society. We'll take just one more. Yes, gender balance. Thank you. No, let's take it from here. We've taken two from this side. I would like us to take one from here. Thank you, ma'am.
All protocols duly observed. My major concern about the presentation, even though I came in late, but I've heard him presenting in one of our programs like that, and I asked a question. Today, I'm directing my question to agriculture. As a student of entrepreneurship and a teacher of entrepreneurship, I am always very concerned about technology, especially to Nigeria and Africa as a whole. What role does technology play in agriculture? And most especially when we are talking about international business as Nigeria is concerned, I realize that we are still way backward. And to me, I believe agriculture produce or agriculture is a way out for us. And for us to get this done, we can say we want to do, what is it called, mechanized farming, which really costs more. So how do we help
exactly.
out?
I was going to say you should reiterate the question. What's the question?
Yeah. How does technology plays a role in agriculture in order for us to be able to compete in international business?
The role of technology in agriculture. But before you respond, I would like to take a comment from her also, a reaction. One more. Thank you.
Thank you for indulging me. It's a very quick one. I think it ties with your comment. The world is now in what they call the fourth industrial revolution. Mm-hmm. A lot of African countries, we weren't even in the first, let alone the second and the third. So for me, the issue of technology is always a sad one, because while we can talk of all these digital developments, there is a child who can't even access a sanitary towel. There's a woman who can't even access flowing water. So for me, it just says our issues are so urgent. We don't have the time to waste because the world has left us behind. How do we bridge the gap?
Thank you, ma'am. I've also been in situations where the argument is not anymore about catching up with the West, but actually looking and trying to define our own future for ourselves. Okay, sir, you may please respond to the question.
Well, I think today technology is playing a major role in agriculture. Even for those who we're talking about exports and imports, before you have to take your goods from your products or your produce from the market, from the farm to the town, before you even look for the seller or the buyer who's going to buy from you. Today, a lot of them have been simplified in the sense that you can even locate a buyer even before they even start planting, because the information is now made available to you, which is something we don't have before. But today you can have it. There's many other ways that technology can happen. In San Francisco, for example, you see people now growing. Now, that may come to the social implications that Professor Afolabi was talking about. They can grow different kind of crops, in a controlled environment. And that's all based on technology. So that can happen, But I want to say something about, the issue is not whether technology is going to be adopted. We don't have a choice in this. It is there already. So we can look at the social implications and the rest. But what we need to look at is how can we leverage what is available for our own use to the benefit of the continent. And that's what I believe we need to be doing.
Thank you very much. And to even contribute to that, I am aware that in Israel today, data science and artificial intelligence is playing a huge role in the agricultural system of that nation, to the extent that artificial intelligence determines the quantity of water that each plant needs and when it needs it. So indeed, technology is playing a key role in agriculture. To lead us on, for today's program, it will be my privilege to please ask distinguished Professor Peter Okebukola to please rise as I quickly highlight some of the most remarkable. Yes, sir, you may just. I want to quickly highlight some of the most striking things from your profile. Professor. Okay, you can come up stage. Please put your hands together for him as he comes forward. Thank you very much, sir. Yes. Professor Peter Okebukola is currently the Chairman, Board of Trustees, Crawford University, and Chairman of Council of National Open University here in Nigeria, and also Chairman, Strategy Advisory Committee, Nigerian Universities Commission. You want to put your hands together for him? He's a distinguished Professor of Science and Computer Education at Lagos State University, Nigeria. Professor Okebukola has served as a team leader of several quality assurance projects involving UNESCO, the African Union, the World Bank, Association of African Universities, and Global Universities Network for Innovation in Africa. Please put your hands together because it's going to lead us further into examining how we use the future to determine and control education in Africa. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Chancellor of a great university, who is not here in person, but I can feel his spirit here. The Vice Chancellor. I'd like to make a special note of a woman of high repute, Professor Isaac Obanya. Professor Obanya, please stand up, madam. Former Vice Chancellor of this university and former Vice Chancellor, Landmark University. The chair of the entire event, Ms. Akintomide, Cecilia Akintomide, OON. I can see Dr. Okwarisen, Professor Remo, Professor Ayonlaja, former Vice Chancellor of Crawford University, Dr. Afolabi, and others, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. For the past 18 years, at least, I've been a key follower of the speeches and writings of the Chancellor of this university, Dr. David Oyedepo, on Christian and secular issues. On both strands, I have been able to identify a consistency in his unshaken belief in the God-given endowment of the black man, used in a generic sense for man and woman. From the shackles of the pervasive perception, because there's a perception out there of the second-class global citizenry of the black man. For the Chancellor, the black man is as intellectually endowed as any person on the planet, white or brown, any color. You agree with him? I do agree with him. According to the Oyedepo thesis, all that the black man needs is to free himself or herself from mental slavery, shake off the garb of corruption and other vices which depress development, and march on to conquer the world. The thesis also places accent on the matter of quality leadership in the march to conquer the world. Covenant University and Landmark University are among the numerous institutions which Dr. David Oyedepo has established for testing his thesis. The two universities have developed undergraduate and postgraduate programs for training young African leaders. Within Covenant University, this center, the African Leadership Development Center, headed by a successful African leader and university manager, Professor Isaac Obanya, is another nursery for such leaders, especially through in-service programs. You know, some world leaders will say, I graduated from the Kennedy School of Government, or I obtained a certificate from the Kennedy School of Government. The time is coming, and it's almost here, that world leaders will boast that they are graduates of the African Leadership Development Center of Covenant University. The key performance indicator of these establishments is the number and quality of leaders produced for the Africa region. Today, October 23rd, 2018, Covenant University, Landmark University, and ALDC of Covenant University are among the leading producers of visionary and God-fearing leaders of tomorrow for the public and private sectors of Nigeria, indeed of Africa. Records abound that in many top-rate government and private sector institutions in Nigeria and some African countries, Covenant University and Landmark University graduates and the products of ALDC are holding sway as leaders. What Africa needs, ladies and gentlemen, is the Covenant, Landmark, ALDC tripod, which I will now refer to as the CLA model. That is what Africa needs. Yesterday, I ran into another thesis by A.S.M. Adache, a renowned writer on corruption. And what he told me was quite striking. He said, when we talk about leadership in Nigeria or in Africa, we're only looking at the top. So you bring secondary school products in a university like Covenant, and you run them through the total man concept and the other brilliant programs that we tool our graduates with, and we leave it there, failing to take it from the bottom. That we are only concentrating, and this message is for Professor Isaac Obanya and the leadership of this university, we are only looking at the top. We are not looking at the bottom. The bottom in this case are nursery school kids, primary school kids that will feed into Covenant University and other ALDC programs. I was impressed by his logic. He said, all these little kids, they have parents who, in the morning they wake up, they are off to Victoria Island to work. They leave home at 4 a.m. They come back very late. These little children will now be swallowed up in the nursery school or the primary school with other children that have been severely corrupted by what they watch on TV, what they glean on social media, pornography that they are engaged in. And when the parents come, even over weekends, they are not able to entrench them, to soak them in deep family values of honesty, of fear of God, and all of that. So we're getting them very poorly prepared for leadership. And so by the time they get to this level, in the top, we're failed. So the Adache thesis is quite clear. While we're talking about leadership, we should look at the top. And we should also look at the bottom. And more at the bottom. Chancellor, ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked to speak on, for the next couple of minutes, future frontiers in education in actualizing Africa's development agenda. Why do I need to look at any frontier when right before our very eyes we can see a working frontier by way of the CLA model that I described earlier for actualizing Africa's development agenda through quality leadership? All I should say is that what we should scale up is the CLA model. We should scale it up nationally, get all our universities to adopt the training that is given in Landmark University and Covenant University. And as a wonderful moderator mentioned, I happen to serve on an advisory panel at AUC. And I want to let you know that we're going to infuse the kind of leadership training that is given in Covenant and in Landmark to all our universities in Nigeria. So we'll scale it up nationally. When we scale it up regionally, that's Africa-wide, we are almost good to go. However, for the purpose of completeness, I will address two questions in the remaining 15 minutes that I have for this presentation. Now, what are those two questions? What are Africa's development? What are the elements in Africa's development agenda, and what are the future frontiers of education in actualizing the agenda? Let's take on Africa's development agenda. Now, there's a flagship document. I suspect that this will have been mentioned over and over again yesterday, and that is a document prepared by all the heads of state and government in Africa, known as the Africa We Want, Agenda 2063. Agenda 2063 is what I'm going to be focusing on in a few minutes to isolate some of the major developmental setbacks. No, I'll begin by identifying some of the major developmental setbacks in Africa which call for the reform and Agenda 2063. We have leadership deficit, we have poverty, food insecurity, youth unemployment, ethnic and religious conflicts, and environmental degradation, among several others. In West Africa, for instance, about 60% of the 362 million people are poor. On August 28, 2018, the UK Prime Minister, Theresa May, labeled Nigeria the most populous nation in the sub-region as the country with the poorest people in Africa. Also worth noting is that 10% of the youth in the region, at least 10%, are unemployed. Ethnic and religious conflicts occur daily, at least in the last 10 years. Most countries in the sub-region are in the bottom 25% of the 2016 corruption index and several other issues that you are very familiar with. Now, Agenda 2063 was adopted at the 24th Ordinary Session of the African Union, Heads of State and Government. Now, this agenda has 50-year time horizon with 5 10-year plan frameworks. It has 7 focal areas, the Africa that we want. I'll take a minute to read through each of these. We'll talk about Development Agenda of Africa. That is it, the 7 focal areas. A prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. An integrated continent, politically united, based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of Africa's Renaissance. 3, an Africa of good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law. 4, a peaceful and secure Africa. 5, Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics. 6, an Africa whose development is people-driven, relying on the potential offered by the people, especially its women and youth, and caring for children. 7, and the last, an Africa as a strong, united, resilient, and influential global player and partner. We Africans, we are great visionaries and planners. We got Agenda 2063 fully figured out with plans of action for the 7 priority areas. We also have the financial plan, just plan, well laid out, as well as the monitoring and evaluation plan. Now, let me move quickly to the second segment. That's the future frontiers in education for achieving the vision. Now, this, in my view, is a segment of my address that can be said to be the heart of the matter. As I noted in the opening statements, education holds the key for actualizing Africa's development agenda. Of interest today are the future frontiers. Future frontiers, I take in this address to mean advances in education that will be called to duty as we aspire to achieve the Africa we want. Now, what are these frontiers? 4 future frontiers stand out. These are related to the role of the teacher, the role of the learner or student, the role of technology, and the role of knowledge. Let us take the role of the teacher. The next 20 years, ladies and gentlemen, during the course of implementing Agenda 2063, the teacher will increasingly assume a role that will be different from what we have today. Today, we have the typical teacher who stands in front of the class with passive students copying notes or half listening, like I can see some, to the teacher who is reading off facts from his or her lesson or lecture notes. It is just like I'm standing here delivering a 30-minute lecture with you all listening, some making few notes, and some punching away on handheld devices, replying SMS or emails. I'm sure that's what is happening now. A few decades down the road, my role as a teacher will dramatically change within the new frontier. My role would be to facilitate learning through requiring my students to harvest information on the topic for the day from a multiplicity of sources. In the class, where the topic is to be taught and learned, it will be my duty to foster negotiation of meanings among my students for the mass of information they have gathered within what we call a constructivist epistemology. It means I have to be on top of the game myself by being at the front end of knowledge on the topic. It means the paradigm for teacher education and training in our universities and colleges of education will have to change and change dramatically. Emphasis will have to shift to empowering teacher trainees with technological skills and the skills of learning how to learn. Since we cannot throw away the hugely analog teachers that populate our secondary schools and universities, a massive in-service capacity building program will have to be implemented to raise the skills of such teachers to a level that matches the requirements of the frontiers of education we want them to attain. Now let's move on to the student. The students will have to be having our classes in the coming decades will have shorter attention spans and are not ready to sit through long hours of lectures. They'll be highly literate in the use of technology and can seek information from the vast resources on the internet for learning anytime, anywhere, use their handheld devices and other tools. They'll be more socially connected than they are today, hence able to disseminate information rapidly. Reading culture, of course, will take a dip. We just concluded a study on reading culture and among Nigerian university students, and the result is quite alarming. Reading culture is taking a dip, and in the next decade or so, it will be worse still. We have to be prepared to engage those students through what has been labeled 21st century classrooms. These classrooms are smart in every sense in terms of technology. The government of Kenya and Tanzania are in the lead of establishing such digital schools of the future. On the frontier of technology, there will be new devices and software that will bring artificial intelligence, that has been mentioned by the last speaker, into our classrooms. Self-learning and e-learning will predominate. On the frontier of knowledge, it will be a future of information overload. So the teacher and the student will have to be equipped with skills of extracting relevant information among the huge mass of knowledge and content. In Nigeria, this calls for the establishment by the National Universities Commission of a certificate category to be known as Certified Teacher of the Future. Holders of this certificate should have expertise in training students in 21st century skills, have abilities to cope with disruptive students, ability to offer service in harsh and remote locations, and should be highly competent in the use of technology for teaching and learning, including deploying e-learning protocols. If covenant and landmark universities have faculties of education, they will have provided leadership in such training program. We also need to pay attention to STEM teacher education, science, technology, education, and maths. That's the heart of the matter for development of the future. If you have the opportunity of getting this paper, I've expanded a little bit more on STEM education. We need to prepare our teachers that will be steeped in content knowledge of STEM. Content knowledge, you walk into a maths class or a biology class in any of our secondary schools, and you find that the teacher does not even know as much as the learners. You expect a gradient between the teacher and the learner. Teacher is there in terms of content knowledge. But what do we have? The teachers know less than what the students know. So there's a call here for us to rethink the way we deliver our science, technology, engineering, and maths education and prepare the teachers. So as I close, future pathways. Beyond rhetoric, in actualizing Africa's development agenda within those frontiers of education of the future, we have to go beyond rhetoric. The African intellectual space is crowded with a lot of prescriptive rhetoric with little action to back them up. Plans of action dot the landscape with little to show by way of achievements. The major impediments to action are resource constraints, weak implementation capacity, and poor leadership. Moving to the frontier of education to address Africa's development agenda will require huge, listen gentlemen, huge investment. For Nigeria alone, we did some, my research group and we did some computation and find that with the current population of Nigeria of about 200 million, that will almost double in 2050, the estimate is in the neighborhood of 136 billion US dollars. Where will the money come from? Without the money, the recommendations in this paper are dead on arrival. In truth, the money can be raised if not for unbridled corruption, which Professor Yonlaja has been clamoring about, lack of prudence in spending, and weak appetite of Africans to contribute to public good. Hence, we need a unique resource mobilization strategy with associated funding options. I've also talked about technical and vocational education, very important as we take the agenda forward. The African Union has developed what is called the Continental Education Strategy for Africa. And that strategy is all plans and plans and plans. You have the framework there. As I conclude in this presentation, I underlined the leadership challenge in Africa as an impediment to progress and offered for the whole of Africa the model of training leaders practiced in Covenant University, undergraduate and postgraduate programs, Landmark University, and the Africa Leadership Development Center of Covenant University for addressing the challenge. I highlighted future scenarios in education. There are several scenarios, ladies and gentlemen. For the purpose of a 20-minute presentation, I've only picked up a sprinkle. But if you have an opportunity of seeing this paper, I have put in a lot more of the scenarios in education that relate to teachers, students, technology, and knowledge, and how these can positively impact the implementation of the development agenda of Africa, especially in the emerging knowledge economy. Leadership deficit is a major impediment to development in Africa. This is reason to applaud ALDC in organizing this series of international conferences to draw national and global attention to the challenge. The far-reaching recommendations for this series of conferences are worthy of attention by all stakeholders who are desirous of a glorious future for our region, Africa. I wish to end on a note of deep appreciation to the Chancellor, Dr. David Oyedepo, for his love for Africa and for the black race. God will keep you, sir, to witness a time when Africa will claim the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Please, let's put our hands together once again for Professor Okebukola, distinguished Professor Okebukola. I will be taking reactions and questions in a moment. Thank you so much, sir. So I listened closely as you presented. And it just came back to me that many people worry that technology will replace human intelligence. Of course, that's education. Some educators also worry that there will be no students to teach anymore in the near future, as technology might take over a lot of tasks and responsibilities. But my question really is, How should leaders in Africa prepare for what learning will look like in 20 years' time? I'd also like to harness more questions and reactions from the audience. Yes, sir. One here. And then two. We need two more. Three. Yes, sir. Thank you. In 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir, for this very wonderful presentation looking at education in Africa. Sir, I'm glad that you also still have influence on the NUC. Somebody spoke about the curriculum that we still have in this part of the world, and I think the NUC is also not has not woken up to the realities of the kind of curriculum that we have, that we still operate. Because going through what they even still see as draft NUC benchmarks, looking at it, one day I begin to see that it's like those in the NUC are not alive to the realities of the current happenings all over the world. I want to cite one example. It affects me. We were trying to push for a program in French and international studies. And we have always had this issue with NUC, looking at it as that the students that will be on such programs will neither be here nor there. And we have tried as much as possible, even as a university, to say that there is it can be done, because we look at the language aspect and look at maybe diplomacy and all other issues in the international studies. And we have always met the brick wall with the NUC.
So the question.
Yes.
The question.
The question is, I think, sir, you may still need to go back there and let them know that some of these things are just real and they are the realities of the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Before we take the second question, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Architect Festus Adibe Njoko. He's the President, Nigerian Institute of Architecture. You're very welcome, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof, I want to commend that wonderful presentation you made. I happen also to know that you are sitting on the board of a National Open University. And I have an aunt, Mrs. Lillian Wankwa, who is also a board member. So I want to emphasize something about attitude, which I think is the major challenge. If I own a school in this day, I would employ a man with attitude than a professor with skills. Now, we spend a lot of time trying to woo a beautiful girl. We devise all kinds of strategies to befriend a beautiful girl. Girls spend all amount of time to look beautiful. But why is it that this very thing we are talking about, we are treating it with kid's glove? Sir, what can we do to our attitude to marry it with the current task of leadership? That is my question.
Thank you very much, sir. The third question. No.
Thank you very much, sir, for the presentation. I came up with a model, technoturity. We don't need to teach our children how to use technology because they are digital natives. But technology and maturity, you see, is a blend. That is, when you go on the internet, what do? So this is what we should inculcate into our children. And this comes to our values, the morals. That is, when you go on the internet, because with time, children will begin to get exposed to this in school. A governor has tried that in Nigeria, but what children ended up using it for is pornography. So please, in the model that we are coming up with, let's bring moral instruction and all other things that we guide students in the use of technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll take one more. I'll prefer a lady this time around. Aha. Thank you. This way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Prof, it's always great to hear you and also get to know the things that you're doing, contributing to education, not just in Nigeria, but I would say the whole continent. I think we've got a state of emergency in the educational sector, and without fixing that sector, I'm not sure we're going to succeed in fixing other things we would like to fix on the continent. But when I look at it, it's not just training the young, training the youth, but we have a large number of adults that need to be retrained to be relevant. So we have both ends of the stick needing desperate and urgent help. That's the number one issue. The second also is you have those who have abandoned completely interest in being trained. So how do you reach out to those that are on the streets begging, the street children? How do you reach out to the so-called touts, under the bridge boys and girls, or young adults? So how do we deal with, the retraining? How do we deal with those who are not even attempting to get the education, but we know that to achieve the development that we're seeking, we need to bring them into the fold? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir, you may please respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, one and all. I'll start with Dr. Cecilia Akintonde, OON. You're very right, Ma, that there is the need to see the deplorable state of education in Nigeria, indeed in Africa, and as some emergency, and declare a state of emergency. What does it mean? What is a declared state of emergency? It means that you now have to channel resources, human and material, to tackle all the identified problems or challenges facing that sector. So, the good news is that after several years of clamoring, the federal government only last week, along with the state governments, decided to proclaim or announce or declare state of emergency on education. That's the hot issue in Nigeria now. And it's not just polemic, not just theory. Efforts are now on the ground. In the next 3 weeks, all the legal actions that will be taken, or legislative actions that will be taken, the resources, from the ports containing money from everywhere, will now be plowed in to address the out-of-school children, all those adults who are not literate and who should be in the net for literacy. All the people are begging, all of those people that you have mentioned, all the Nigerians that should have access to education, that state of emergency will address them. So I can see you are nodding, and I think it's on a happy note, because that's very good information. I agree with you regarding morals. Recall that I mentioned it. using the Adachi model. You see, values and morals are extremely important. We recently concluded a study because we wanted to deploy e-learning for teaching difficult topics in science subjects, biology, chemistry, physics, maths, and English in Lagos State. We have expanded it to Rivers and Sokoto states. And we wanted to find out the e-learning readiness of our secondary school students in Lagos State. So our researchers went around, and what did we find? Some of our data collectors went a little bit low to primary schools, and they found that all these primary school kids with their internet-enabled handheld devices, most of the time they were watching pornography. So you are talking about technology, we have to address the matter of morals, the matter of values. So I'm queuing behind you on that. On the matter of attitude, you are also very right, sir. You're very right that we need, when we're addressing leadership, the matter of attitude must come as one of the priority points that, and I'm sure that ELDC and the other phases of training leaders in Covenant, in Landmark, that are from my CLA model, are also looking at leadership. The leaders are here, and attitude, excuse me. I'm sure they will want to strengthen the aspect of attitude there. About curriculum, very interesting. Before I became the executive secretary of the National Universities Commission 17 years ago, I had the same feeling as you. That AUC will just sit somewhere, and I'd like to take a minute to explain that. AUC will sit somewhere and just chop down the throat of universities like Covenant, a curriculum on computer science or architecture. Foul. This is the algorithm. This is the step-by-step process. All the professors of architecture in Nigeria, let me take the architecture program, will be invited. What's your course? What's your course, gentlemen? What subject? What do you teach?
Language.
French, fine. So all the professors of French will be invited to NUC. NUC, we don't have that expertise in-house. We use the resources in the Nigerian university system, 165 universities today. So we invite the professors of French, Oga, make us sit down here. We want a revised curriculum in French. Give us all the elements that will go into it in terms of topics, in terms of the courses, in terms of topics, in terms of resources, everything. So this group of French professors, we can't bring all of them together. We'll bring in the senior ones and the ones that we think are smart, that are current. Yes. So they will then develop the draft of the curriculum. And so what then do? We now send to all the universities because we want all the 165 universities to have ownership of the curriculum. So all the universities will now, if a vice chancellor gets for the different courses, we will now send to the French department. French department, make your comment too. It's just like a wedding announcement. If you don't make any this thing for this moment, keep your mouth shut. So we sent to all the departments, and that's what was sent to you. So you have the golden opportunity to react to this, developed by professors of French in your area, not by NUC. So when you have reacted, we'll then bring all these things together and bring another batch of professors to synthesize what you have. And that becomes the BMAS, which we send to you. So I'm not going to go back to NUC to tell them anything different, because I left office has always been like that. So you have an opportunity to make your input into that. The last one from your moderator herself. How are we prepared in Africa for the future and using education as tool? I will say, like in all matters relating to Africa, I will say our wheel of progress is moving, but it's moving very slowly. It's moving very slowly because of the weak commitment of African leaders to all of this. As I said, we have plans, plenty of plans, very elaborate plans. But the commitment of our leaders to put their money where their mouth is very weak. But I can tell you that with prayers from our daddy Bishop Wedekwa and you, we will get there.
Amen.
Yes. One last point. You know, the African Union has one university. It's called the Pan-African University. Pan-African University, by the time it was to be started, I was representing Africa on the global UNESCO group, 1998 to 2004. So the UNESCO people said, Africa, you can't get one. The African Union, you can't own a university. And I said, that's not on. So in the communique of the global conference that we held, I was Chaplain General and I squeezed that in. They were very angry, but I said, no. It has to be there. Did you know that the university has now been set up? It has footprints in the major sub-regions. We have one in, we have a campus in Ibadan, specializing in something different for the world, in Kenya, specializing for the world in South Africa and all of that. To contribute money to run, I'm on council of that university, to contribute money to run that university, nothing is happening. We are depending on European Union, on the Germans to give us money to run the thing. So, madam, we will get there. We need your prayers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You want to put your hands together for distinguished Professor Bukola for this wonderful presentation that has stirred us all thinking about the future of education in Africa. Leading us on will be another presentation on leadership in Africa, mainstreaming gender and youth engagement. Of course, gender-sensitive policies are the front burners now in a lot of international organizations and, of course, national organizations. May I please ask Advocate Lucia Loangne to please rise as I highlight some of her most outstanding outputs in the last couple of years. She's the Africa Tax Leader with the Ernst & Young Advisory Services South Africa. You may please come up. Please put your hands together for her as she comes forward. Advocate Lucia is also an admitted advocate of the High Court of South Africa and a well-regarded tax professional who has emerged as a new generation thought leader. She previously served as Barclays Africa Group Head of Tax, covering 12 African countries, and before then spent 7 years with Shell Oil Products. Lucia is a board member and vice president of the South African Institute of Tax Professionals, and she is currently pursuing a PhD in technology, innovation, people, systems, and business management. Please put your hands together as we listen to you this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much, and good morning to you all. Madam, we say Shongwane, okay? Shongwane. Chair, can you allow me to be covered by the existing protocols? Thank you very much. Good morning to you all. Good morning to you all. I'm actually very, very excited to find myself here in the midst of greatness, because for me, the thought leadership that I've experienced in the past 2 days is just amazing. And it talks to who we are as Africans. It talks to, we actually have what it takes to find ourselves and to find each other. We're having conversations about corruption. We're having conversations about the leaders that we choose, because we choose those leaders. They're not chosen somewhere else. Obviously, save for systems that we are told are rigged and it doesn't matter what you do. But in the majority of cases, we actually stand up and we go. We say, these are the kind of leaders that we want. Because for me, it doesn't really matter what else we talk about. If we don't address this first point of who is driving this train, whatever else we come up with, however beautiful, however intellectual it is, we will not get it right. So as a people, I think my first challenge is, what are we going to do? What is civil society going to do? We have the youth, who are like 60% of our population. They are concerned about the future. We are telling them that the future is in their hands. But we're having conversations where they're not taking part, they're not sitting at the table where decisions are made about their lives. I'm going to give you a recent example that happened at home. We're having the job summit, and we're saying most of our people who are, majority are youth, are not employed. They're very frustrated, they're very confused. But we go on, we have a conversation, and now the whole media is about, have you asked us what we want? Because remember, we have given you a chance to lead us, but you're getting it wrong. We continuously are getting it wrong. The kind of issues that we are talking about are perennial. They've been around for so long. We have talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. But we are not coming up with the right solutions. And it is for that reason that I love the 7 points that I saw, because that says this is the Africa we want. This is the story that we want told about us as a continent. And I've been asked to talk about the 6th point that talks about an Africa that is people-driven, and in particular an Africa that takes their women and they take their youth with. So that is what I will be talking about. But before I even do that, I think we need to be asking the question, we know the Africa that we want, we know how we want to be defined 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 50 years from now. And we also know that how we have been defined to date is not who we want to be. That's not who we are. So before we get there, I want to just paint a picture. Oh, they told me what to do here. Let's see. Oh, okay. Good. So I want to start by just giving you a picture of who we are as a continent, because for me, that's where we need to start. We are a continent that is very, very rich. I actually say God so loved the African continent that He blessed us with natural resources. He blessed us with minerals. So we will not be forgiven if we don't get it right. The future is going to judge us very, very harshly, because that is who we are as the African continent. And it wasn't a mistake. I don't think the master plan was that we should be the poorest continent in the world. I do not think so. There has been a better plan for us, but we have misused it. And it goes back to who has been leading us to date. So having seen that we have all these beautiful things that we have been blessed with, let's get to who we are again. These are our realities. This is the picture that I actually say we should be putting in every government office. We should be reminding them that in spite of everything that we have been given, this is what you have produced. It shouldn't be something that we get them to get away with or to forget. Why do we have our people running away from us choosing to pay the ultimate price, that is choosing to die as they cross the Mediterranean Sea, to go and find a better life, because we have failed them. How can we be that? How can we want to be defined like that? I mean, that has to be just too painful. When we have people who are living in shack houses and then they get gutted by fire, when we have kids who drown in pit toilets because we have not made better plans, and not because we don't have the resources, because you have to juxtapose that with the lavish life that we see around us. Each time something of that sort happens, for me, we need to go back to our leaders and say, it is because of you. So right now we've created that distance. They just say, but I'm not God, I don't provide rain. I'm not God, I don't do whatever. Because we're not holding them accountable. I want us to each time go back to them and say, so many kids have died because of 1, 2, 3, 4. Think of poverty. Think about people who sleep hungry. Not only today, not tomorrow, next month again. That there is no hope that things are going to be different. Rich as we are, we have 4 times the average rate of poverty and people sleeping hungry, malnutrition. We're sitting at about 27% of our population. That has to be something that we reject with the contempt that it deserves. But we don't do that because time and time again, we put the same guys to continue leading us. In an Africa where we say we are youthful, and that has to give us dividends, as Ma'am Cecilia has said. We have our leaders whose average age is about 78 years. Who are they leading? And with all due respect, they're sitting in the departure lounge, holding their school bags, ready to go home. Why aren't we relieving them of their duties? Why should we not have, like, an age that says you can't continue driving this? Like, why don't we have that? Like, as Ma'am Cecilia says, why don't we have that performance management contract? In any other life, we do have that. So why are we holding them to some different standards? We're actually not holding them to any standard. We're paying them. Remember, we are the taxpayers. So we are paying them, but they dictate the terms of their employment because we are just passengers. Again, I think the future is going to judge us and judge us harshly. In Asia, for me, is not an option anymore. And I love the conversations that I've had over the past 2 days because it tells me that somebody somewhere is thinking and they are realizing the agency that is required to resolve and move us from where we are to a better state. And it's not going to take, it shouldn't take bloodshed. We know that already. We know that we can actually sit and think and go and do things differently. But then have the determination to say, this is what I'm expecting from you, and if I do not get this, I should have a reason to recall you. It should just be like that, but we don't actually get there because that's not who we are. We are not taught to stand up and defend who we are. It talks again to the donor aids that we have. Why are we a donor fund destination, given the richness that we say we have? And that doesn't just come like that. It comes with strings. And continuously, you look at them, our macroeconomics, like in just 5 top African countries, the debt that we have, the fiscal deficit and the current account debt, just repaying the interest on that can actually take us halfway in resolving the issues that we have. And there's nothing wrong, like the speaker yesterday said, when you need help, yeah, it's okay to go find a loan to just get you out of the situation. But we are perpetually on loan terms. We are perpetually servicing interest. We're not even touching the capital. So what kind of future are we leaving for those who are coming behind us? Because they are going to inherit a massive debt. We're not doing anything different to make sure that we can start addressing the capital, so that we get to a point where we say, after so many years, there's no plan that talks to that. Nobody actually touches on, gee, is this our international foreign, is this the debt that we have? Who's going to start paying for that? We live on, it's fine, we'll service it, we're paying the interest, everything is fine. It cannot be fine. It cannot be fine when our people are dying in numbers, because we are not a peaceful country. And we have women and the youth being affected far much more than any other group. You go to our health system. How can we be a country that saves lives only when you have money? When you don't have money to pay that private doctor, not even in our countries, we have to fly out to go find medical health. So think about that person who cannot afford it. This is not about to change unless we do something about it. We need to address the health system. And it's particularly important because when it comes to women, it affects their economic development. If we don't address sexual health, we don't address family planning, this affects how they are going to develop and be part of the economy. When it comes to education as well, if you don't have the money to go and pay for that expensive education, you have a challenge. So everything is defined in monetary terms. I don't have money to educate my kids, perpetually I am going to be very, very poor. So how do we make sure that we address such? And we are saying, we are the taxpayers. We are going to hold you accountable. I'm paying tax. I should not be paying these huge medical bills. I'm paying tax. I should not be paying so much for my own security. The government must provide that. These are the things that we need to be resolving if we are to get somewhere as a nation. We go back to our youth. We need to find a way, how do we make sure that they are engaged? Because as it is, you have just mentioned morality. Our youth, when we look at them, they're very, very frustrated. They're frustrated by how we are leading them. They're facing so many challenges, ranging from cultural challenges, morality challenges, socio-political challenges, economic challenges, because they can't buy all these nice things that other people are buying because they don't have employment. But that's because we haven't focused on the right things, including how we educate them. How do we make sure that we move and include them and start by educating them in the right ways? We're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. For me, that gives us a massive opportunity. We can talk about, yeah, but technology, maybe that's not what we needed. We need this transformation that is happening. Somebody said we don't have a choice, and I agree, we don't have a choice. But we can make sure that we benefit more than any other region by making sure that the majority of the youth that we have and the women that we have get involved, and we choose them deliberately in numbers. They must be in those STEM qualifications, because that is the future of work. The future of work is not going to be what we know today. It's going to transform 360 degree. So this is the group that we can focus on, for me, to make sure that we can transform where we want to get in this space. The president of Uganda said to us, if you don't take women with, if you don't take gender parity as a priority in your organization or in your country, you should be getting many other things wrong. And we have to think about that properly, because that is actually very, very important. And I'm saying that because I was just listening a few days to a lady addressing, she's Miss Gonzalez, I think. She was addressing the AU. She was actually throwing numbers, and for the first time I had a wake-up call, because she's saying the cost of gender inequality is about 96 billion USD. And then you're like, what? So we have, as Africans, to start saying, what is our cost? What is our share in that 96 billion? And so that says to us, we need to treat this as like state of emergency. What are we going to do? How do we start pivoting towards the right solutions and making sure that we include women in the conversations that we're having? We include women in our boards. That, for me, says we should not only be thinking women in public offices. The private sector must be held accountable as well. And not only in terms of women participation, the private sector must be held accountable. When we talk corruption, when we talk siphoning monies out of countries without paying the right taxes, we need to make sure that they are held accountable. And there is consequence management when things don't happen the way that they should. Africa's top listed companies boasts only 12.7% of women participation in their boards. Out of about 2,680 or so seats, women only have about 364 seats. That has to tell us there's something that we're not getting right. And it's not a question of we don't find them. Women are there. We need to just do the right things and make sure that we can include them. But it starts with how we talk to them, how our culture can actually accommodate them getting into these positions. That starts for me with that little girl we have at home. What do we tell her? What kind of education do we, at home and also at school, do we say these are the only careers that you can follow? We need to start changing that. It starts with the conversation we're having. Women try to be entrepreneurs. We ask them for collateral. But we forget that we are the same people who have said, because of our culture, they are not going to inherit from their parents, from their fathers or from their husbands even. They are not going to inherit. But we ask them for collateral when they start and raise credit for their businesses. How can we be that and go back to where this culture comes from? Those are some of the things that we need to be looking at and saying, no ways, this does not serve us anymore. Let's find a way of doing it differently. Okay. Oh, no. And for me, this is the other one that I found very, very shocking. We go on and we say, no, but life has changed. You know, women are participating in all of this. But when we look at the reality, that slide talks about the number of years it will take us to actually achieve gender parity. 171 years. We have to be shocked. We have to stand up and say, no, not in my lifetime, because that's an indictment on all of us. And it's not a women conversation only. We need men in this conversation. They hold the power to help us change this. And for me, what is disturbing is that that's 2016, 2017 that we had those stats. In 2014, the World Economic Forum said that we need 81 years to find this gender parity. So in just less than 3 years, that has increased by 37%. We have to go back to the drawing board because we are not still doing the right things. And for me, it starts with agreeing on the facts. when you interview, like we do in my organization, you talk to, you have surveys where you ask people, what do you think about this? Men and women are sitting in different places. We're not factually aligned in terms of what is challenging us. When you ask men, do you think we're doing enough for gender parity? They tell you, yes, yeah, we do have Lucia in EXCO. The fact that it's one Lucia is not necessary. The point is we do have Lucia. But that cannot be right. So we need, before we can find each other, we need to find the right facts and agree on the facts first. Then we can get to the solutions. And solutions for me, like, what are the things that need to change? Starting with just agreeing on the facts, being on the same page with men about the things that are not going right. Ma'am Cecilia gave another example of, I don't know which country you mentioned, but where you said the president was very adamant, I am going to find females. Ethiopia, 50% of my cabinet is going to be females. And then we say, no, but they're not there. They're not there. Like, we can't find them. Why did he find them if we are saying they're not there? And it talks to my career. I remember when I started, I was like the only, okay, I come from South Africa, so you remember that in South Africa, we're not faced only with gender issues, we're faced with race issues. We're 30 in a boardroom, I'm the only woman, and I'm the only black person in that room. The kind of stupid conversations that you find yourself engaged in, like when you have your tea breaks, people come to you and they ask you, what is your claim to fame? And you're thinking, what kind of stupid question is that? What is my claim to fame? And you haven't asked the other men sitting next to you. So when we start engaging about such things, you want leaders to step in. Like, I would go to my commissioner and say, you know I'm here. I haven't seen you asking me, like, how is it going? I'm like, surrounded by men, and white men for that matter. Have you asked me, like, are you interested in what is happening? Or you'll be interested the day I take my bags and leave because the organization is not accommodating of this different person. So these are the things that as leaders we need to be mindful of and reach out and talk to our people and find mentors as well. We want our females as well as our youth to find mentorship. That's part of the solutions that I think we should be thinking about. And you're talking about state of emergency. It is a state of emergency. Rhetoric, we all have heard all of it. The youth saying to us, talk shop, they're closing their ears. We need a different narrative, and that starts with how do we pivot towards the solutions and the Africa that we said we want to aspire towards. That is the Africa that we want the narrative to change towards. Thank you very much.
Let's put our hands together once again for Lucia Luwane. Did I get that right? Thank you so much for the expository presentation on leadership in Africa, mainstreaming gender and youth engagement. I believe we're all aware that in most multinational and international organizations, gender-sensitive policies are at the front burners of these institutions, and I believe that a handful of us will have comments and reactions to the presentation that she has made, and I will take about 2 or 3. Yes, sir, that's 1. It's also important to highlight that when we speak of gender-sensitive policies, we're not only talking about, women-sensitive policies. It also includes men-sensitive policies. That's where you're coming to. Exactly. It also includes policies that are sensitive to the needs of men and to the needs of women alike. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Advocate Lucia, for that brilliant presentation. In discussions on this subject in Africa, we do a cross-sectional narration rather than a longitudinal narration. Cross-sectional in the sense that we report that we are far behind other regions in terms of gender equity, no matter how you've described it. But you need to see how quickly we have moved in Africa. I'd like to hear about the progress that we have made. Advocate Lucia, we have made tremendous progress in Africa in terms of addressing this subject. If you look at where we were 20 years ago, I will ask my question, man. 20 years ago, you find that we have done fairly well. The factor of improvement in Africa is almost like double the factor of improvement in other regions, given the socio-cultural barriers that we have in Africa. So when discussing these issues, we should not discount the importance of socio-cultural variables that impede the women to get into or any matter related to gender equity that we're going to be discussing. But more importantly, I want to hear from our speakers on this subject, how we have moved 20 years ago, not where we are now. In the Nigerian university system, I just give a quick example. If you look at the data in terms of enrollment, participation, and achievement of women in higher education, 20 years ago, you find that the narrative has changed tremendously. As I speak to you today, 2018, we have almost like 50-50 in terms of gender parity. In terms of participation, better females. In terms of achievement, many more of our girls, our ladies are making first class. So please, let's give case studies of good practices and how well we have moved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Actually, here at Covenant University, it's interesting to note that females most times lead the class. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And I think Professor Okebukola has said some of the things I wanted to say, but I should still say a little more. I worked most of my life with women, and they've been my bosses. And I never knew so much about gender until I got to some circles, and people started talking about gender in terms of women, and it shouldn't be women. I had an experience when I was working, and we closed late, and I had to wait for my boss to close. I was rushing to off the UPS and everything, and she shouted, "Ha! What do you want to do?" I was not thinking of anything, but a man seen in a place, you see, men are also marginalized in some areas, but we don't mention things that young men go through. That they are arresting people, there's a chaos, there's one challenge anywhere. The first set of people to arrest are young men. And this is gender imbalance. We should look at that aspect also.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. I'll take one more comment, question, or reaction. Okay, there's none at this time. Okay, there's a lady up there, please. Thank you. Who? We've gone this way, and then up there.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Joy, and my contribution is, so many times our attention is on the women. We're just talking about empowering women and all of that, and we tend to forget about the male. Forgetting that these women that we are training would live with the male that we are neglecting. And at the end of the day, it comes around again to those women. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe one more comment from Dr. Parison. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a quick comment, and it's about this gender thing. I like the statistics that Professor Okebukola has just presented. We're producing equal number of men and women out of our universities. And in fact, if you look at it, studies have shown that the leadership competencies, the women rank as high as men, if not better, than the men. Because many of the things come natural to the women. Okay? The nurturing, the cultivation of that is an essential element of leadership, is more to be found with women. However, the real issue is this. This is not translating into representation of women in decision making, which is part of the problem we have. Look at it this way. I mean, disposable income in this country, who controls most of it? It is the women. They decide the brand of this, the brand of that, brand of that. The manufacturers and the companies and the businesses that organize this don't have any of such people on their boards. So you wonder, okay, so we are deciding what the women will decide to buy. Why don't you just put them into the decision making so that we get straight to the point? So it is a question of how are we converting the base that you are talking about into representation, because if we don't, we're walking ourselves.
Thank you so much, sir. And I think it's because of some of these concerns that you have raised, I mean, that's all we can take for now. Excuse me. That's all we can take for now. Yes, I mean, giving some of these concerns that you've raised, that's why we have a lot of international organizations actually putting forward policies within the organization to ensure that we have gender parity in these organizations. I'm not playing to the tune for women or men, gender parity. So please, you want to respond to some of the comments?
Part of my... I think Dr. Oparison has done part of my response, but Dr. Bukola, I'm with you in terms of what you are saying. It is correct that we have made progress, because we have moved from those primitive times where when we have to choose between whether we're sending a girl to school or a boy, we will, like, you know, maybe let's send this girl to school, because now we know that if you educate a girl, you're educating a nation. But that's not where we started as a society. So like Dr. Oparison is saying, that pipeline is coming through, but it hasn't translated in how we want to see this. And the reason why I was showing you the stats is to say, we actually think we are making progress. We have done something, but it's not yet time to clap hands. We still have a long way to go. We still have cultures which are thinking that Lucia is not going to inherit from her dad or from her husband because she's a woman. So these are the things that we need to be addressing. We still have cultures where we're telling our girls that all you need is to find a good man. That cannot be financial planning. There is just no way. But we're going on like, if you find a good man, it is financial planning. So those are the kind of things that we need to be addressing, but you're not far off at all. And young lady, you are very, very right. The boy child, because remember, we're talking a lot about the girl child. There are too many initiatives about the girl child. But I've had a conversation where I've said, if we don't include this boy child, I've actually gone worse than what you're saying. I'm saying this boy child is going to be a danger to my girl, because he's not going to be educated. He's not going to marry my girl because he's not educated. He doesn't work. He's going to stand on that robot and he's going to mug my girl. So we have to find a way of that balance. So it is not we're doing this to the exclusion of what we need to be doing for the boy child. But we are focusing on the girl child because the girl child has been marginalized for a very long time. Okay?
Thank you so very much, Advocate Lucia. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I believe in the last couple of hours we've listened to 3 expository presentations. The last before our tea break will be presented by Dr. Morakinyo Okparison. Please put your hands together for him. Dr. Morakinyo Okparison runs a consultancy practice called 3E Performance that supports individuals to bring out the leadership in them such that they and the organizations can be the best that they can be. It's important to also note that he is also a senior fellow at the Lagos Business School, a school that is ranked by the Financial Times. For over 7 years, Dr. Akin was the HR Vice President for Royal Dutch Shell's downstream business in Africa, a member of the executive management team for the Shell Products Africa, and a member of the Shell Downstream Global HR leadership team based in Johannesburg, South Africa. Dr. Akin now enjoys supporting others as a coach and by being on the faculty of a couple of business schools as well as writing. Dr. Morakinyo Okparising, it's a pleasure to have you this afternoon speak to us. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, permit me to stand on existing protocols. Time is very much against me. I have just been advised that the time has been further cut, so I'm going to be whizzing as much as possible through this. What I'm required to do this morning is not a simple task at all. Any way you look at it, I'm to talk about the texture of leadership. That's the easy part, because we can describe texture. I mean, we can all agree on what the texture of material is, isn't it? That's easy. You can feel leadership, I can feel it, so we can talk about the texture of it. I'm very happy that I'm not asked to discuss or to define leadership. That's a more complicated thing to discuss. The hard part of what I'm told to do is to offer prescriptions. Many things are easier said than done. And I've been asking myself, who am I offering these prescriptions to? Leadership. Let us start with what leadership is and what leadership is not. Leadership is not about positions. There are ample examples of people in positions of authority at the top of hierarchies that are not leaders. They are authorities. We follow them because they have the wheels of the vehicle and we can only fret over their conduct with no option of recovering the wheel or getting off the bus. Some of us, sadly, are jumping off the bus and ending up dead in the Mediterranean. Leadership is also not about what you know. There are lots of people that know lots of things, but they are not leaders. Leadership is who you are. It is seen in what you do. It begins with what you do, but the real evidence of leadership is in what you cause other people to do. When you cause people to be willing to go on a journey with you, and on the journey you inspire them to release discretionary effort, to address issues along the way, and then you galvanize them to ignite the success of each other along the road, then you are a leader. Here is a definition. I hope I can have it. Oh boy. Okay. Here's the definition of leadership that I have been working on. Leadership entails sizing up a situation and understanding it as it really is, and then envisioning a more desirable future. Then inspiring people to release the discretionary effort it requires to make that journey with you. Leaders facilitate the creation of a climate that supports people to become the best that they can be, thereby performing to their utmost. That's what leadership is, and you can see the key elements there. It's about visioning and influencing. It's about sizing up the situation, envisioning a more desirable situation, being social architects, creating an environment for people to perform. When you do these things, these are things you do that we see. They are behaviors. They're very visible. You recognize it when you collide with it. Then you are leadershiping. In fact, I use the word leadershiping because it's an active thing that you do. It's not hierarchical. It is an active verb, and I use it. We don't use it a lot. Wherever I talk, I use it. You are leadershiping or you're not leadershiping. You see, we have never lacked people who size up situations and define our realities, and then envision a more desirable future. Across Africa, our history is replete with heroes that did that. Our nationalist forefathers, and we have them adorning our walls as we come into this auditorium. Many of them, as well as the people they inspired to make the journey, paid the supreme sacrifice. Those people were fully invested in the future that they envisioned. As far back as 1959, even before we gained independence in Nigeria, a governor of one of the regions built the first television station in Africa. At that time, a major technological feat. He stated that the objective was to educate, to entertain, and to enlighten people. There was an implicit recognition that this is the prerequisite for mobilizing people to make the journey. It was a further emphatic statement concerning investment in human capital development for a government that at that time had embarked on enlightening the masses and had free education for our people. Leaders are going somewhere, and they are taking people with them. And here is the question: when you have a belief, and your belief is clear, people who believe what you believe will follow you, even long after you have transitioned to eternity. So a good question is this: do the people in authority today believe anything that we know? If we don't know, how much more believe in what they believe, then do they really have followers? If they don't have followers, then what is it that legitimizes their authority? And if nothing legitimizes their authority, can we really call them leaders? See, there's an African saying that says a leader without a following is just taking a walk. The tragedy, though, is that as they take this aimless walk, they are wasting the lives and generations that they have inflicted themselves upon. In my attempt at diagnosing our current realities and looking back, maybe one thing those past leaders had in common was their youth. They were invested in the future that they were creating and taking us to. It is not an accident that they achieved quite a lot. But today, you look at it, it's not quite so. Professor Kebukola referred to Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. In fact, a lot of what I have said in this document derives from that. Now, here is it. If you look at it, this is a document that was endorsed by African heads of state in 2015. The average age was 65 years of those who designed this document and put it together, was 65 years. The average age of the oldest 10 of them was 78.5. The longest serving have been serving for 29 to 36 years. The irony is that Africa has the youngest population in the world. You can look at that. Africa has the youngest population in the world, and yet, that is the leadership that's doing it. Let's be honest. What future are we talking about? In fact, when I read the document, the first question I asked myself was, this the Africa we want, who is the we are talking about? It is unlikely that me will be here 50 years from now. So the question to ask ourselves is, where are these people whose future we are describing? Where are they today? And that's the key questions we need to ask. Where are they today? Many of them are in pregnant wombs. So where will they be born? On bare floors, where heroic nurses, without the basic infrastructure, are using their mouth to blow mucus to keep them alive. That's where they are. And this is in a country that is the 13th largest oil producer with the highest GDP in Africa. How many of them will be orphaned by the time they get to the age of 5, when 830 women die in childbirth? one of the highest in the world. Many of them are in maternity wards. Like I said, how many of them will make it to age 5? Many of them should actually be in school, but how many of them are in school? 50% of Nigerian children, let's take that for an example, are under the age of 15 years. 70% are under age 30. How many of them are aware of this vision that we have painted? Mercifully, yesterday we had 3 young guys, Femi Taiwo, Austin Uzim, and Demilade Oluashina. And they painted a very, very beautiful picture of the future of Africa. It gladdens my heart, no end. All hopes are not lost. There's a lot that's still going to happen. But here's the challenge. Many of our youth today believe that this country has given up on them. That Africa, actually, this continent, has given up on them. And they're embarking on very perilous journeys across the Mediterranean. And they are dying. They are not the lazy ones, as we sometimes describe them. They are the daring ones who believe in themselves more than the continent believes in them. They are going in search of the same opportunities that many of us who have the means have purchased plane tickets for our own children to go in search of. They are not lazy at all. Lazy people do not undertake such adventures. What is being done to mobilize them to prepare for this future? Frankly, who cares? Maybe a few people do care though. But then, what means and resources are available to those who care and desperately want to do something? These are people who are ready to plant a tree they know they may not live long to enjoy the shade of, but are confronted with insurmountable odds of competing voices amongst those in authority who model everything that undermines that future. People who know the values of planting a tree and have the resources to plant a tree, but will not plant it because they think they will not be there to enjoy the shade of it. So you ask yourself, do we really have leaders? Ladies and gentlemen, the statistics are scary. This is what it looks like, the Agenda 2016. Can you see? We're moving from the left to the right. That's all we want to achieve. That's part of the things it's saying we want to achieve. But the truth of the matter, like I said, many of these children today are not being prepared for this future. Most of the things we heard today will tell us they are not being prepared for this future. While serious countries are focused on STEM education and creating STEM and innovation labs, what empowerment apparently means to some of our leaders is providing them with wheelbarrows, and nobody thinks that that is crime against the generation. We talked about disruption. I like the discussion this morning on disruption. Nigeria has 80 million hectares of arable land, but we can't feed ourselves. Israel has 380,000 hectares. Not only are they feeding themselves, they are net exporters of food. Why? They are using sophisticated irrigation, hydroponics. A lady asked this morning, what is it? You know, it's hydroponics, and it's about putting minerals and making solutions of minerals in water, and you can grow crops anywhere. That's what it is that is happening there. And these are minerals that we are endowed with here in Africa. They are all over the place. If we are not careful, we shall soon discover that very soon history will repeat itself. That we are exporting the minerals to drive this same technology that will render arable farms useless. We are beginning to export those minerals which nature endowed us with, only to import it as manufactured nutrients to drive agriculture, and then we will have to subsidize it again. After all, we have oil, we are importing fertilizer. We have oil, we are importing petroleum products. What does it take for this to happen again? Before our very eyes. Are we on the verge of the next economic colonization, where we produce everything we cannot use and need everything we cannot produce? Or at best, everything we produce but we cannot use. Or we send them to others to make them, and by the time they bring them back, we can no longer afford them. The story of cocoa and chocolate. Is it going to happen again? Very, very soon it can happen. You see, I think one mistake we make that we need to begin to address. Our real assets are not the minerals. Our real assets are our people. Lucia referred to very copious provision that the Lord has endowed us with. These are resources that we should use to develop our assets. But what did we do? We started focusing on the assets, on the resources, to the neglect of the people. And that's not the way it's meant to be. We are living the future. Somebody said something yesterday. 1 billion, are you seeing 1 billion problems or 1 billion opportunities? I think it's a choice that is staring us in the eye. The way we look at it and what we choose to do is going to be very, very critical. So as you can see, everything I have said, it is not about, look at those countries that do not have minerals. The Luxembourgs of this world, who at one time their biggest foreign exchange earner was a radio station, right? Or Japan, or a whole number of countries that do not have these resources. And they are doing very, very well, thank you. Leadership is intentional. Leadership is about valuing your people. But do we have leaders that are going somewhere? Do you have leaders that are valuing us? Do you have leaders that are taking us? Listen to the conversations we have. What are the conversations we have? It's always about the things that divide us. Revenue allocation. How do we divide this? How do we divide that? Those are the things we talk about. Those are the things we fight about. Who's talking about how do we begin to create? We never have such conversations. And we bring up children who grew up understanding that these things divide us and that is the way it is. We've written a history that has pieces us as a nation, and yet we're looking for unity. Watch every conversation that we have. It's about the things that divide us, never about the things that bring us together. Just imagine if that were to change. And now we're not talking about those things. And it's about every unit producing something to contribute to the center and contributing to the running of that center. You'll be surprised how the conversation will change very, very quickly. There will be no more inflation of census numbers, because now it is about creating and contributing. But consistently now, it's about dividing. That's how our conversations are so toxic with very, very serious consequences. Now, let me touch on two things that are very dear to my heart. It's not just about education, it's also about healthcare. Because if you're not taking care of the education of your children and not taking care of their healthcare, then we're walking into problems. Healthcare. I have statistics, I hope it can show. The biggest burden, that's it, it's not showing very well. Out-of-pocket expenditure is the green bit. It is the highest for the low to medium income. It is small, 13% for the high income, 57% for the lower income people. That means our people carry a very heavy burden. A very heavy burden of their own health care. And that's in a country that's supposed to be preparing us for this future of 63. So when Professor Okebukola said something about there's no commitment, there's no energy in leadership, you wonder why there's none. They're not invested in that future. It's not their future we're talking about. No matter how much you try. Now here's my closing remark. I've stopped talking to people of my own generation, because frankly, I think we have wasted it. I think the time has come for any person that has any sincerity in our own generation to begin to help these younger ones to find their way for this future that belongs to them. It is the only way. And a lot is happening already. Makoko, right? That villager. Fantastic things are happening there. Young people are getting up and educating those people they find there. With their own resources, they are doing it. Now, let me tell you something. Those of us who are privileged, and don't forget that this privilege was paid for by some people. There are parents who leave their own children to fend for themselves while they come to take our own children to school. And you wonder what happened to their own children. House helps that leave their own children at home that come to take care of our own children. Who takes care of their own children? All of this, and everybody that pays wages that do not, you can calculate it, it's not rocket science, that this will not pay for food in a country where minimum wage we are struggling with 18,000 naira, isn't it? And a bag of rice costs 18,000. Do you need any mathematician to tell you that this is not going to work? Now, for as long as this happens, we are not serious. And we cannot expect turkeys to design the Christmas menu. It is time for the young ones whose future we are talking about to take this thing. And they are in privileged positions in companies and in enterprises today. There's a lot that they can do. And I'll just quickly, just give me 1 minute, please. Two things that I want to tell them to do. In your advocacies, when you challenge these people in authority, what are you engaging them on? Engaging them on your own individual company benefits, or engaging them in social issues that is going to affect everybody. It makes eminent sense to engage them and push them on social issues about the wage of people. It is people who earn that spend. If you have not paid salaries for years, for almost a year, and then you expect people to spend, and we are all wondering why the economy is collapsing, your businesses, those of us who are privileged young people, begin to recognize that if you do not begin to influence and drive this, your business is imperiled. That's one. No matter how successful you are, when you eventually make the money, it will be tainted, because we have a bad view of those who are successful and comfortable in this country. Why? So it is enlightened self-interest to begin to do these things. Help in educating the future. Set up things that you can afford. Train children. Set up labs. Set up things. Because why? They are going to be your employees in this future you are going into. It is enlightened self-interest to be invested in that future of these people. Thank you very much.
Please have a seat, sir. Please have a seat. Thank you so much, Dr. Akin Okparison. Thank you for that very passionate presentation. You want to put your hands together one more time for him? Indeed, I'm glad that you highlighted the fact that we need to begin to pay attention to the younger generation. Even from, you may please be seated, sir. Yes. And for me, I have stated here that in my view, 3 key prescriptions drawing from your lecture will be to enhance the capacity of future leaders, the future leaders' ability to look at today's actions differently, the ability to gain insights into how we can best approach unforeseeable challenges, and also the ability to rethink our assumptions about the future. With these 3 key prescriptions, and then the ones you've offered, I believe Africa has a future indeed. Please put your hands together once again for him. I'll take reactions from us before we move on to the next session. Okay, I'm going to take from persons who have not spoken before. Number 1. Yes. Number 2, number 3 is going to be...
Yes, hello. Thank you very much. My name is Quincy Okon. I'm in MSc1 MBA. Thank you very much for that beautiful presentation. Yes, before I go on, I'd like to say that we Nigerians need to establish for ourselves what our Nigerian dream is. I mean, he has said a lot of things now, and the truth is we don't know what the Nigerian dream is. or it hasn't been established. So we should establish that for ourselves. Now, I'd like to ask you, sir, you talked about education to a certain extent. Now, I want to ask you, I don't know if you agree with me, but there's something I want to prescribe. That would you see, or do you think that education now and education then should be more diversified? What do I mean? I mean that we should stop at the secondary school level. And after secondary school, you can decide to go into skills acquisition, because the truth is, the world is changing. It's not, we are not looking for degrees now. Even the people governing us, they don't have as much degrees as we do now. So do you feel education should stop at the secondary school level? You should do a university education if you feel that you want to pursue something in that direction. That, I mean, I just feel after the secondary school level, you can use that time to build your skills, build your capacity, instead of just going and paying school fees. Like, we have this recurring adventure of secondary school, you go to university. I don't know, I feel if you agree with me.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The second question from this angle. Thank you.
So thank you for that presentation. My name is Abiola Babajide. On a particular day like this, I was discussing with my students, and this line of discussion is what we had. I told them that they're going to find themselves very close to 50 years now, like I am now, and they will find out that nothing has changed. In the sense that, if you look at Africa, Nigeria to be, over the last 40, 50 years, the investment in education and healthcare have not improved significantly, meaning that things are not changing. The Haitian world looked at themselves some 30, 40 years ago, and they took a decision to invest heavily in education and healthcare. And that is what brought them to where they are now. And they also have a plan from here to another 50 years that will make more than half of their population millionaire. But when you find out in African context, there's no such investment going on that can change things rapidly like we want to. And rather, we find out that in a lot of things, most people are more concerned about themselves. So in that line of discussion, they were like, what can we do? And you find out a cross-section of African students, you look at them, they are helpless, they are perplexed, and they are like, what do we need to do next? And that is what I'm trying to put forward to this. You have said it, the next person, the next education, the next thing that you need to do, going beyond politics, the things that individual can do to connect, to change things around us. And I think that's the way we need to begin to look at, because on government part, on African leaders, there is no anything on ground to change to bring about the change that we desire.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. We'll take one more, and we'll have your response, sir.
My name is Chinoye Love Moses. I want to pick up from where she stopped. And thank you, sir, for that beautiful presentation, as if you spoke my mind. I have this notion that when we talk about leadership in Africa, we are always looking at the top, just like he said, and forgetting that the definition of leadership is, ability to influence someone towards accomplishing a particular set goal. So when we always look at the top, looking at a particular person as a leader, then forgetting that myself, I'm equally a leader. What is my personal responsibility in ensuring that we are that kind of person you are looking at or criticizing, that you are not making the same mistake? So looking at African problem, as long as leadership is concerned, I will look at it that we all have personal responsibility to ensure that we make our honest contribution, a little bit from me and a little bit from you. We'll get there. In terms of corruption, fighting or COVID, as long as that is concerned, find out that that issue you are looking at somebody that the person is corrupt, how are you fighting corruption around you? Then in terms of reduction of poverty among youth or among women, what is my responsibility? Then educating of young youth, you know, what am I doing to ensure that they acquire the right education? As a teacher, you don't just enter the classroom and just teach ordinary. We are thinking of future leaders. What is the impact, the value you are adding to students, preparing them for tomorrow's leadership? Then in terms of politics, this is where we are now. We're talking about bad leadership, bad governance, and what are my contributions towards not making the same mistake, you know, like we have done before. We want good leadership, we want good governance. What are you doing in terms of ensuring that you vote the right person, or even pray that God will put the right person there? In terms of another issue, yes, issues that have to do with Nigeria as a whole, we all want good issues concerning Nigeria. But what are you doing? What am I doing? For instance, in the churches where you belong, they call for prayer for Nigeria. Some people don't turn up. Some people don't even pray. Later on, fasting for Nigeria. Then talk about, you know, when we look at, you know, Asian countries.
Finally.
Yes, finally, when we look at Asian countries, what they have done. For instance, Japan. You know, Japanese experience is a good one to use. I remember in those, before Japan became what they are today, they closed all their borders, manufactured goods within, and they ensure that nothing is going out, nothing is coming in. That we, the citizens should use what we produce. How many of Nigerians are using Nigerian products?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. Thank Before you respond, sir, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Vice Chancellor, Covenant University, and all
Okay, thank you very much. There were quite a number of comments, a few questions. Let me just underline one thing. Like I said, leadership is not those people in authority. When you separate and we stop calling leadership as those people in authority over us, and then examine whether they have the leadership behaviors, you can make that distinction and decide, do our leaders have what it takes? Do they have the leadership I talked about? And I think you can say that the texture and feel of it is a little bit questionable. We envision a whole load of stuff, but we do not work our way to get there. That's point one. A lady here asked the question about school, about education. And you see, the thing about it is this. We can all see it. The traditional jobs, as we know them today, will not exist a few years from now. Somebody shared with us, doctors are getting very obsolete. Very soon, we will have surgery being done by robots. These days, you can hold a handheld device like this, and you are prescribing and diagnosing medicine that people can buy. The entire phase, that is the disruption we had about this morning. Teachers, we have to be retooled. The traditional jobs that we keep going to school to learn are going to change. Okay? Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean the end of jobs. New jobs are being created. And the areas where those jobs are being created, if you look at it as, if you study the trajectory of technology, are about problem solving. How do you solve this? Uber solved the problem. Some of the examples you get, where is the problem and how can I solve it? Many of our education, the way we are educating our people today, does not prepare them for this problem solving. It prepares them for professions that are getting extinct. So my personal advice, for instance, and I always tell my children and people, I say, look, stop asking your children, what do you want to become, a lawyer, a doctor? These jobs are finished. Ask them, what problem do you want to solve? Okay? Begin to talk to your children And you'll be surprised, they'll be sitting down there, oh, there's a problem here. Exactly. So how are you going to solve it? These children are more technologically savvy than the rest of us in this room put together. They know how to use this thing to solve problems. Let us enable them to be able to do that and give them problems to solve. For me, that is the essence of education. It is not the kind of education today that we give. How many of the, today I hear 20% of our children do not even know how to, after primary school, can still not read. They do not have access to this. That is the challenge. And I know you want to...
yes, sir.
You see, there's a lot to say. There's very little time to say.
You can engage Dr. Aking immediately after this session.
We do not have to look
you want to wrap up, sir?
We do not have to look for money to do many of these things. The money is already there. Do you know how much we spend on healthcare that those who can afford it spend just traveling abroad? $1 billion it has been put at. The federal government budget on tertiary health in this country is 1.3 billion, right? So we are taking all of this money and donating it for other people, Dubai, India, and all of that, to expand their medical facilities, and we are dying here. What do we need? It is just that will, but that will is not there. That is why I'm saying, do our leaders, are they there? Let's begin to ignore those people. Let's just begin to change ourselves, one person at a time, one interaction at a time, whatever you can afford. That's why when I retired, I decided I wanted to go into the university. One person at a time. That's what we need to do. But there's a danger. There's a danger. It is technology. Technology, it's positive, but it portends great danger. Because frankly, if you look at it today, technology has advanced way beyond our spiritual maturity as a people. And if that continues, that's where you're going to have the kind of problems we're talking about this morning. So how are we going to make sure that as we accelerate technology, our spiritual growth and our civics and our morality grows at par?
Thank you, and thank you very much, sir. Thank you so much. You want to make that applause louder? Thank you, Dr. Aking Okwarison. We appreciate the passion that you have shown throughout your presentation. A 5-minute food for thought before we go for the tea break will be coming from Dr. Rahim Razel, a senior researcher, Faculty of Applied Science and Engineering, University of Toronto. He's going to be telling us how we can use collaborative online education to nurture leadership in engineering. Thank you so very much, sir. You're welcome.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's very nice to be here. I'm here from Canada, by the way. I know Cecilia's in the crowd. Canada's the only other country in the world with 50% female in the cabinet, so I wanted to make sure we didn't omit that. Very, very important statistic. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a very inspiring last day and a half here for me. Compared to conferences that I'm used to attending in Canada, United States, and so on, this is more like a political rally. I feel very charged, I feel very energized, and I have 5 minutes to get my stuff through, so thank you very much. I have a set of slides that I brought in. I'm not sure if they're on the board. There you go. Let me just summarize briefly. I've been working on a project collaboratively with colleagues in the United States, in Canada, as well as here in Africa. We call ourselves ESCA, Engineering Education for Sustainable Cities in Africa. And we've been working on this project for about 3 years, with the first couple of years was more background, traveling through Africa and trying to learn what the engineering education landscape looks like, with a view to hopefully making small contributions by way of changes that are necessary. Our thinking started with this project by Professor Dan Hornweg, one of our colleagues and collaborators, which projected the population growth around the cities in the world. As you can see, by 2100, 13 of the top 20 cities in the world by population are here in Africa, with Lagos expected to have a population of about 88 million. It's very hard to imagine and get our minds wrapped around how do we envision a Lagos that presently, with the challenges it has with infrastructure, transportation, and so on, how do we envision the city in the future? So we essentially asked ourselves several questions. How do we envision these cities? And what about the city builders, the engineers that are going to build it, the vocational training folks and so on? What do they look like? What do they need? And what kind of educational system do we need to put in place the necessary number of people, but also the skills? So we see ourselves focused at the intersection of sustainable cities, scalability, and engineering education. And scalability, of course, is key for us. There are tremendous programs, such as here at Covenant University, where a relatively small number of students are trained very highly, and that's really what most of the leading universities are good at these days. But the question is, can we scale that up, because that is what we need in Africa. There's a number of folks involved in the project. It's led by Professor Murray Metcalf at the University of Toronto. For the sake of time and because I stand between you and coffee break, I'll just zip through these things. But we have a few, 4 scholars from Africa that work with us as well very closely. We really appreciate their input. Some of you will recognize Professor David Olakani, who is a faculty member here and was sitting here until a minute ago. We've traveled, as I mentioned, throughout Africa. We've visited with a large number of universities, a significant number of universities in various regions, exploring what various issues are. This is proof that we've been all over the place, so I'll just zip through these slides. And essentially what people tell us is, I want to focus on 3 key issues that seems to be very salient. This will not be new to you. I've heard many of these themes over the past couple of days here, but I want to just focus on 3 of them. As we speak to opinion leaders, deans of engineering and faculty across Africa, what we see and what we hear is that the engineering education system model is largely broken. It doesn't produce enough engineers. It doesn't produce engineers with acceptable quality, and the quality that's produced ultimately is disconnected from societal needs. There's various causes of it. I've put it in those circles, but I won't go through them. The second is that people tell us that we need institutional reforms and updating here in Africa to make sure that the needs are met vis-a-vis the talents that is produced. In 2 respects. One is disciplinary boundaries seem to be critical barriers in Africa that people believe that we must break through, as well as connecting students with practical experiences much more so than we do today. And the premise is that if you want to address complex challenges, global health, climate change, sustainability, urbanization, these complex challenges require complex solutions. They require different disciplines to come together and work together. And if we're training students in silos, they will not be prepared for that kind of a world. The third aspect that people highlight is when we ask about what critical skills do we need that presently are not being met. And interestingly, even though most of the folks that we've consulted with have been engineering faculty and deans and so on, the skills that they highlight are what most of you or many commentators here would classify as soft skills. We, for different reasons, we call them power skills. Okay, these are skills in communication, in digital literacy, in various aspects of leadership, innovation that has been talked about in this conference, which are critical even for technical fields such as engineering that we must teach. But the question is, how do we teach this in a way that is scalable, that goes beyond Covenant University and leading universities like this? Okay, how do we expand access to that kind of education? And we thought we'll start with focus on the power skills, using technology, and if you combine that with collaborative content development, a model that I'm going to talk about briefly we've been experimenting with, and collaborative teaching, so that we don't all reinvent the wheel, we don't all devise the same online course, and we don't all do everything over and over and over again in every university, okay? So, in a nutshell, what we've taken that model of collaborative content development to create a few courses and to experiment with it. This was a course at the University of Toronto. We developed it, and we did a preliminary test in 2017 with some students from ALU and faculty from the University of Toronto. We've now taken that, developed it further, 4 modules. We've tested over the last couple of months with among others 10 students from Covenant University right here, as well as a similar number of university students from University of Johannesburg, University of Dar es Salaam, as well as University of Toronto. And we have this global classroom kind of context going to see how that works, to troubleshoot it, to learn from it, and to develop it further. And our goal is to develop this course further and test and compare and experiment with it sort of in a more extensive way in collaboration with our colleagues. Another e-textbook on sustainable cities is another initiative we've just begun, and we're looking for collaborators to really work with us in all of these projects. I want to talk about online education in general. I don't think I have time, so I'm just going to skip through that. I'm going to give a talk actually at a class here from Professor Olukani. If anybody's interested in online education, I'll expand further on that and the new technologies that really make this area of online education and online learning truly promising, and I believe highly, highly relevant to the developing world. Online education in Africa, again, we see quite a bit of activity in Africa, unfortunately not enough. Some courses the Covenant University have showcased there, UNISA, University of South Africa, in South Africa is quite active. I visited KNUST a couple of years ago. They have a beautiful online education program where they devise courses and teach at a distance with an amazing model of distance versus sort of localized education. In summary, I just want to highlight 4 or 5 points here. One is that engineering education is really key for addressing sustainability issues, urbanization issues. Everything that we see, everything that we touch almost is likely being devised by engineers. And if they are not doing a good job, if they are not capable, really we cannot catch up, we cannot address the challenges that we need. Pedagogical innovations and the way we teach, how we teach it are critical importance. Online education presents us with a truly transformative opportunity in Africa and broadly in the developing world. And the question is, are we going to take this opportunity? Are we going to wait for similar technologies that sort of mature? We'll wait for 20 years until it gets to the developing world, something that we see chronically happening around the world. And of course, as the theme of this conference, it's going to take leadership from leaders in the organizations like this. It's going to take investments. It's going to take tremendous effort to prepare us for this technology and to prepare Africa to use this technology and to shape the technology the way you want it to be shaped. Okay? I used to be involved in global health for a time being, and it took 20 years plus for hepatitis B vaccine to make it to the developing world until India was finally able to produce it at a very low cost. If we wait perpetually in the developing world for others to develop technologies, we perpetually fall behind. Somebody mentioned that teaching will be transformed in the next few decades. Teaching is being transformed today. I just came from a global online education conference where you see tremendous amount of activity around online education with tremendous potentials through virtual reality means that we can offer maybe even laboratory experiences to students that otherwise would not achieve it in a much more accessible way. I've put some slides in case they share it later on conferences, presentations, and so on, and I'll leave you with this slide for more information. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rahim. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'll say that the food for thought for us as we plan to go for a lunch break is, how do we solve tomorrow's problems with today's solutions? How do we solve tomorrow's problems with today's solutions? I believe you have reactions to his presentation, and I'll take only two. Only two. Okay, one here, and maybe perhaps that will be all for the noon. Yes.
Thank you very much. It's a wonderful presentation from my very good friend. I met him yesterday. And I have actually spotted a lot of leaders here. We're talking about leadership as if the person exists out there. I've met a lot of great leaders here that have changed my perspective. And one of them just had his presentation. So I want to say thank you very much, sir. Then I'm glad to notice that you talked about impactful education powered by online programs, okay? I love the fact that impactful education is coming up in today's presentation because that is the missing link. Education wouldn't mean anything to us if it is not impactful, if it is not solving today's challenges. So it's not a question I'm asking. It's just like an addendum to what you've just said. So thank you very much for that wonderful presentation once again. God bless you.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to appreciate this wonderful audience for keeping through these 5 presentations in the last couple of hours. In the next few minutes, we're now leaving for our tea breaks. We're leaving for our tea break. I would like to make the following announcements. All registered participants are to pick up their meal tickets at the registration desk, and all our invited guests are to join us at Cafeteria 2 for a taste of African tea break menu. Thank you so much. And please, we return in the next 15 minutes because the Chancellor's session comes up in the next session. I would want to keep to time. The next 15 minutes is just the tea break. We'll return in 15 minutes. That is 12:55. 12:55. 12:55. Thank you for your time.